Hey guys, welcome back to Vince Custom. So today we're going to do a work in progress video of taking this fawn bust and using these smooth on crystal clear chemicals and creating like a pool of water around her. Now when I picked up this bust back in was it 2019 or 2018 at the Jersey Fest show, I really liked it and I had this vision that I would paint it up and put her in like some kind of pool of water. But the other thing too is I wanted to test her with the scale 75 paints because I never used them before. So I will put those links in the description. Plus I will also put the artist link in the description too if you're interested in getting this bust or some of their other products. It's really cool. You can check it out. What I did is I did a little bit further with customization. I actually brought her arms down a little bit and I sculpted out the back because it's one of these busts where it's kind of cut like that, like almost like a Sideshow LSB. So the idea is I wanted to have it down a little bit further so this way it looks like her arms are down and the back and everything is in the water. So these products in the back are from Smooth On. We have a Crystal Clear 204, we have a Crystal Clear 200, and we have an EpoxaCast 690. Now, when I first did that Savage Land Storm statue in the Crystal Clear, I called Smooth On. I was on the phone with a couple people. I was explaining what I wanted to do. They recommended Crystal Clear 204. I put her into the base. I mixed up the Crystal Clears and it was beautiful. But the problem is the Crystal Clear 204 takes a really long time to cure, like 24 hours. So it soaked into the paint and some of the paint sort of broke up and took away from the base and the feet a little bit. So after talking to Smooth On at the Jersey Fest show in 2019, they said what I should have done is actually coated the item in a EpoxaCast, which is, you know, clear epoxy. Get it like a candy coated shell and then put it into the Crystal Clear 204, and this way the EpoxaCast wouldn't really react to it and it would protect the paints. Now I'm not really sure how that would work though, because you know the EpoxaCast I'm going to have to kind of clear around her body underneath there. It'll look like she's wet because I'll come up a little bit higher. And then I'll let that dry for like, 24 hours because the EpoxaCast 690 takes a long time to cure. And then once that's cured, I could take her and put her into the base and see if this 204 is still good. Because, like I said, you only have a shelf life on this stuff. So the minute you open it up, it might go bad. You never know. Now, I do have a container of Crystal Clear 200, which actually cures faster. That stuff cures, I think, in like, if I'm not mistaken, an hour or two. I think pot life is like an hour or a half hour or so, and it cures in like 8 hours or something. I completely forget. So I really want to use the rest of this Crystal Clear 200 in here first if I have enough in there, but I'm not sure if I have enough in that container. I do have enough of this 204, but the problem, like I said, this 204 I didn't have enough to do another storm statue, and plus once you use this stuff it goes, you only have a shelf life, so that's kind of where we're at right now. So what I'm going to be doing is, the idea is I'm going to have to touch up this paint real quick, get that fixed up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a container. I'm going to get this EpoxaCast mixed up, and we're going to put her in the container. Like basically if I have another one of these glasses, which I think I do, or another container, I'll just mix up a lot of the EpoxaCast up pretty high. I'll dip her into the EpoxaCast, pull her out, let it kind of drip down, and then put her on like a piece of wood and let it cure, because EpoxaCast cannot cure thick. It has to cure in like 1/4 of an inch thickness at a time. So if you were going to use EpoxaCast clear, you could do it with this item, but you would have to fill it up to here first, fill it up to there, fill it up to there, and each day and keep filling up to where you want it to go, and then you could do it. But the problem is, if you put color in there and you mix wrong, you would see the variations of color. Now, if you weren't going to look at the side and you were only going to look downwards and not look at the side, the EpoxaCast would be fine in that sense. Like say, if she was in like a pool and there's all rocks around here and you're not looking through the side, then you could do the EpoxaCast a little bit layers at a time and then it would be fine at the end. But the Crystal Clears are the ones you want to use that go thicker, because Crystal Clear you can have it like 3 inches thick or 4 or 5 inches thick, and it kind of cures better that way. So that's kind of where we're at right now. The other thing too is I wanted to do a murkiness on it, so I wanted the bottom of it like so my idea is if I have a cup here, I want to mix up some whatever Crystal Clears I use with a little bit of this black dye, which is very tiny, just a little bit, and get it down there a little bit murky at the bottom. And then like the blue and green, I want to mix up another cup of the blue and green together, pour that in, and sort of let them kind of like blend together a little bit. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, just so the idea that it's murky at the bottom, it's getting like greenish blue up top, and then my third cut would just be pure clear, and then I'll put a little bit of clear up there and sort of see how it works. Now, it's an experiment. We'll see how this kind of turns out. This is something I wanted to do last year, but I didn't have the bust painted up. I kind of did it over the winter, and I sort of have these products left. Now, the other thing about these products, you need to have a respirator. You need to have good ventilation. You can't do this stuff like, you know, I wouldn't do this stuff in my studio during the winter time with all the windows closed and the heat on. I always save this stuff for like the summertime, so you could open up the windows, leave it outside and stuff like that. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to touch this up. I'm going to find another container. We're going to mix up some EpoxaCast. We're going to give her a nice good clear coat. We'll put her aside, let her cure up for a day or two. And then after that, we can figure out which Crystal Clear I have enough of. I'm hoping I have enough of the 200 because that cures faster. But if I don't have enough of that, I'm going to have to use whatever's left in this 204 and let this sit for that 14 hours. But like I said, this is almost going on a year old since I opened it. But I'm pretty sure it should still work, but if it doesn't, oh well. I'm not ready to go out there and spend like another $40 or $45 on just a Crystal Clear trial kit just to do this much and not use the Crystal Clear. I like to try to save a couple products at once and then use these, and then buy one of these containers and do all those products at the same time. It's just one of those things. This stuff gets very expensive, and it really sucks if you go to waste the stuff. But let me get her touched up. And we're going to mix up this EpoxaCast, see how this works out for the next day or two. And then hopefully this weekend, if the weather is right, they said we're supposed to have like a 70 to 80 day. And I can actually get this Crystal Clear mixed up and let her sit outside. And hopefully that'll do what I want to do. Also, what I'll do is I'll try to order the AK Interactive stuff for the water rippling. But that'll be later down the line. So let's see if we can get this set up today, at least with this EpoxaCast. Okay, so in the garage, I'm actually measuring and weighing out all the stuff of the EpoxaCast, the A and B, because you got to do the ratio of 100 to 30 by weight. But what I do is I use the calculator on the Smooth On website, and it helps me know exactly what like kg grams I need, and it's easier to mix that way. So the idea is I'm going to mix that stuff in the garage. I'm going to bring it in here. I'm going to pour the EpoxaCast into here. It's going to fill up pretty high. I'm going to take her. I am going to dip her into here like this to where I want the clear to go. Give her a nice good candy coat. Kind of pop her out, let her drip down a little bit, and then put her in this container here and let her sit overnight. I'll kick on the airbrush booth for like a little while to get some of the fumes out. And all the EpoxaCast that's in here, what I'll do is I'll pour it into this container and I'll let it cure where it's supposed to cure. And then what I'll have is a nice good clear sheet of EpoxaCast in case I ever need something down the line. Like say, if I had to create a window for a base, or I needed some broken clear stuff on a base or whatever, you know, there will be a sheet here without it going to waste. Because if you leave it in this container, it's too thick to cure, and then it just becomes like, I guess it doesn't cure correctly and it becomes a mess and you have to throw it out. So it's better to throw it in a container and not waste it. I did look into my Crystal Clear 200, and sadly I don't have enough of the 200 to do what I wanted to do. So there's not enough in there, because from what I understand, the 200 is like 15-minute, 20-minute pot life, and it wouldn't react to the paints long enough, and therefore I probably wouldn't need to do the EpoxaCast step. But since I have a little bit left of the 204, which takes 24 hours or 16 hours or whatever, let's do this in practice anyway. So this way, if I ever have to do another Savage Land Storm or another item where I want them to be in a nice, good, crystal clear base and I need to use the 204, we'll get a good experiment to see if the EpoxaCast protects the acrylic paints to put into the 204. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's a good video to experiment and see what happens. So let me go in the garage, get that stuff mixed in. We'll come and pour this out. Once this is filled into here and she's sitting here, these two containers will go back in the garage so I don't have those fumes. So only fumes will really be what's layered on here, and this booth will take out enough fumes now just so I'm not breathing it in for the next few hours. And that's pretty much how it should work out for now. Okay, so I pulled all the other chemicals out into the garage just to let those kind of fume out. And I'm kind of just looking at this right now, and I kind of just like maneuvered her a little bit. And sadly, I'm seeing the EpoxaCast doesn't like these scale 75 paints. It seems like the EpoxaCast is pulling the paints downwards. But it's not the end of the world. So, I think already, if I was ever to do this again, whether I wanted to do it with like an anime kit, like in a pool of water, or a statue in some kind of a water, or something like what I'm trying to do now, you want to have stuff that cures faster, not this longer setting stuff. I think the longer set of stuff is probably better for like scenery, like if you're creating like a woods and you want some kind of like water and pooling and stuff. The EpoxaCast 690 is probably better for that, and the same thing with the 204 Clear Crystal Clear. For what I'm trying to do is I think I would need the EpoxaCast that is cures faster, like the pot life is like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You pretty much mix it into the cup, you get it done there, you put your item in there, you pop her out, you put it down, and it starts curing up right away, and it doesn't like drip, and because this takes like 24 hours to cure, so that means all this stuff in there is going to keep pulling it down, pulling it down. But this could be a happy mistake though. This might actually work out to my advantage, because when we put the Crystal Clear 204 on here, maybe all that weird little bleeding stuff will create some cool little effects down there. So it could be a happy mistake. I'm not sure yet. But I think the key idea is if I was to do this specific item in that, glass container, I would want the Crystal Clear 200. When you mix the Crystal Clear 200, you pretty much have a pot life of, I think it's, what does it say? You got a pot life of 20 minutes. So by the time you mix it up and it starts curing and you pour it in, you don't have it sitting there for 24 hours wet mixing in with your paints. After 20 minutes, it pretty much turns to like a gel, and then it cures up and it starts to harden after that. So that's the thing. The reason why we got the Crystal Clear 204 for the Storm statues because it was way bigger. The 200 can't really cure in something that's like, more than like 4 inches or something, whereas the 204 can. So, like I said, these products are all different for different projects. So when you want to do something smaller and you don't have a lot of room, the Crystal Clear 200 and the EpoxaCast stuff that cures faster is better. But when you're doing something bigger like sceneries, or you need thicker bases, you need the stuff that cures longer. So it's a give and take. You got to find out what your project you're using, what you're trying to accomplish, and what items you need. But I still think this is going to work. So I'm not worried that it's pulling down the paints. I'm seeing some weird rippling, but that's going to work out to our advantage. That's not a problem. I think it'll work out good. I can't use the 200. There's not enough in there. But the 204 should work out, even though it's about a year old. But we'll experiment and see if this works. So I'm going to kick on the airbrush booth again. Let this kind of cure up for the day. We'll come back tomorrow. I'll fix up the bottom. We'll see how it looks in 24 hours, which means probably around same time tomorrow. And then hopefully this weekend, if we have a nice hot day, we can do the Crystal Clear 204 in the cup and see how this looks at the end. And then we can get that AK interactive and create the rippling afterwards. Okay, so the EpoxaCast cleared up nicely. It cured up okay, but it did bleed. So you got some bleeding under here, and you got a drip here, and it's really messy. But it's more of an experiment. So one of the things that I realized is after the 24 hours came, the EpoxaCast was still very soft. You could push your fingernail in it. So that told me that there wasn't enough heat to kind of cure it. So what I did is yesterday I put it in the sun, like around its 24-hour mark, and I just let it sit in the sun for like a half hour. And I kept turning it too, so the sun wasn't always just beating down here. I would turn it every like 5 minutes, and the sun actually in the heat really helped cure it up to like a really good candy shell. So that's something to think about. I think it's just because it's old, it's not enough heat. We're still kind of in the spring, but not pure summer, like really hot. I don't have a hot box for it, so I think the sun helped cure it up. But that's alright, it's not the end of the world. But when I ripped it off the metal piece that I had her sitting in, I should have put more release on there, because what happened is this kind of ripped off some paint down here, and it's all dripping over here. I should have probably tried to take care of this too, but I didn't pay attention. Like I said, we're just testing this out. The idea is anyway, the bottom is going to be like a darker clear resin, and it's going to fade up to like the bluish green up top. So hopefully underneath here it's going to look darker, but we'll see how that looks out. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go in the garage, I'm going to take my mold release here. I'm going to spray the glass just so this way when I pour in a crystal clear, it's easier to pop it out. If you don't have any kind of mold release in here, it's very hard to get that crystal clear out of there. You can, but it takes some time because I did some experiments because I bought a 3-pack of these, and then when I had the crystal clear at the bottom, it took a long time to get it out of there. So if you don't have any mold release and you're trying to wiggle her, you might snap like some flowers or ears or something. So it's better to do that. Now I'm going to have to mix up this crystal clear really well. Like I said, it's been sitting here for almost like a year now. And like I said, I don't think it's really going to be that good anymore. But maybe this will work out. I don't know. It's just an experiment. So I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to get my long sleeves on. I'm going to get my respirator on. I'm going to go in the garage, get everything set up. I'm going to mix everything, and then I'll let her sit in the garage till the end of the night till I'm ready to clean up shop. And if I think it's going to be a warm night, I'll leave her in the garage. If not, I can bring her, just put her in here for now, and then tomorrow put her back out in the garage or whatever. But it should work out pretty well. So let me go in the garage, get this all set up, and then hopefully we can get this poured and see how it looks. Okay, so it worked out the way I wanted it to. Now, if I was to do this again, I wouldn't put as much black in there. I probably would have made a really darker bluish green for the bottom, but I think it worked out fine. And the good thing is I poured it in this direction because the black sort of kind of went in here. So a lot of the black kind of fell up here, where this is kind of that darky, murky green where you're going to look most of the time anyway. So I think that works out to the advantage. That's the only downside of mixing, like different colors with clear resin. If you're not mixing them in the cup and then pour it in, you're going to get like that variation. But I think for this it works out fine. The whole idea was to let it be really murky at the bottom, but still see the front paint, the flowers at the bottom there. So I used masking tape to keep her in the cup because if I didn't, she would actually float to the top. So you got to use masking tape to kind of keep that going. Otherwise she'll float and she'll be at an angle and it'll be messed up. So I wanted to keep her centered. If I was to do this again and I really wanted it on point, I had the experience and I know what I really want, I would find a bigger cup to do this in because it was hard to pour this clear in there without spilling on the side or spilling on her. But I think it's going to work out pretty well. I kind of like the way it's looking. It's just a matter of once it cures up by tomorrow if I can actually get her out of the cup. I'm not really sure. But maybe in about like 6 hours, 8 hours, she'll be a little bit kind of like a gel probably, where I can move it into the house and I won't have to worry. But I didn't go any higher than where I did the epoxy. So I'll keep an eye on this over the next few hours to see if this clear resin reacts to any of that epoxy. But I'm not really seeing anything just yet. But that's the same thing that happened with the storm. It looked great for the first half hour, and then afterwards it really started messing everything up. So we're gonna see. I don't know. We'll see how this plays out for the next few hours. If nothing happens within the next few hours and it's working good, we'll come back tomorrow when I pop her out of the cup. But if I start seeing errors, we'll come back, we'll film it, and I'll show you what's going on. Okay, so I got some good news and some bad news. But at least some of the good news is that when you do the clear EpoxaCast onto your item, and as long as it doesn't react to your paints, you get a nice good candy shell, and it does not react to your paints at all when you put in the crystal clear. So that's a good thing. Now that I know that if I'm ever going to do this again, I get the fast epoxy, dip the character into that fast epoxy, let it dry, and then I can put that character in some crystal clear, and that should salvage it and help it out a little bit. Now, the problem I did with this one is I put a little too much of the black ink in there. What happened was the black ink was at the bottom, it was nice and clear blue up here, it was looking great. But then, since this is super slow clear resin, it started swirling and going around. The black ink just started going crazy and just going places I didn't want it to go. So it got a little bit darker than what I wanted, so that's okay. But it's a good experiment. At least I know that I can do this process and it'll work. Now the other thing is the Pyrex glass did not want to come off. No matter how much I tried to, wiggle it out and everything, I was afraid I was going to snap the ears and the head off and stuff. So I had to kind of smash it with a hammer in a recycle bin. Normally you need like some kind of a mold, or you need some kind of a plastic container that has some kind of a give to, you know, get the piece out of it. I knew that going into the project, but I just wanted to try with the Pyrex glass just to see if it would come out, but it didn't. So, I mean, it's an experiment. It's a good experimental piece, just, you know, seeing how things are working out. So at this point, I'm not going to buy the AK Interactive and do the rippling. This was, like I said, just more of an experimental piece. It's something I'll just kind of like let on my shelf, sit there, and just kind of like always look at that and remember what I need to do and what not to do if I ever do something like this again. I just got to get a lot of those little glass pieces out there because that Pyrex glass kind of shattered in tiny little pieces. Nothing that's kind of like sticking in my skin or anything. It's just I got to get it off the item. Now, if I really want to salvage this piece though and make it look really cool, what I could do is I could get like a circle type of a base, get like a really bright LED light for underneath of it, and you turn it on and you'll get a glow coming from the water. So I'm going to turn off the lights now and put a flashlight on it, and you'll see the swirling effect underneath of it. It looks pretty cool. So if you look underneath of it, you can sort of see you got some really cool looking swirling effects in there, you know. I like that, but the problem is I went a little too dark with it. So you can't have it underneath because that's where the resin is. It's got to be around the sides. So you can kind of see what I was like really wanted to go for. But like I said, it started swirling like crazy. But I like that murkiness. That's what I wanted. I wanted that greenish murky, but a little too much black paint in there, and it just started swirling. So that's something that I'm learning now with clear resin and adding color into it. When you start adding that color into it, and it's not one all, like if you mix up the color and it's just a green blue and you just put that green blue here, it's going to be fine. It's going to be mixed. It's not going to swirl. But I guess when you start adding variations of colors, you will start getting swirling effects a little bit, I guess, if it's a really potent color at the bottom. So that's kind of what happened. I'm glad I did this project with this. I'm glad I experimented with it. I have a better understanding of the products now, of how to go about it. The crystal clear sort of kind of cured up okay, but there is some areas I'm not really too sure about. So like I say, these products, you have to use them up once you open them. It's not something that can sit on your shelf for a long time. I mixed the containers up as much as I could, but I think they sat around too long. So like I said, some of the parts up top are okay, but it still feels a little weird and tacky underneath here, and it's not the mold release. So I'm not sure if it's the clear resin, or now that I've popped out the Pyrex glass, maybe sitting in the sun today might help it cure. But right now we're on like a 48-hour mark instead of the 24-hour. So I don't think it's really going to work out that well. So all in all, this was a good bust to experiment on. You know, I tested the scale 75 color paints on this. I tested the EpoxaCast 690 to see how the candy coat goes, but that reacted to the paint. And then I tested the crystal clear that's a year old, mixing in with some other colors. So sometimes you just got to get an item, you got to buy some products, and you got to experiment, and you got to get an understanding of how they work. I could watch lots of videos on this stuff, but sometimes when you're doing it yourself mixing, you still got to get that feel. So that's kind of my little experiment. Hopefully you guys like the way she came out. Hopefully it gives you guys a better understanding that if you ever want to go this route on your products or your statues or whatever, you know what to do now that you shouldn't do, like what I did. So I don't know. That's the way it's at. I'm not upset about it. You know, like I say, it's always good to just get some item, test it out. Okay guys, so it's been about 48 hours. I'm actually going to stop messing with this project now because some of this old products didn't really work out the way I wanted to. The black dye sort of kind of was a little too dark. So there's a lot of things that went wrong on this, but the good news is I have a better understanding of what to do now for future projects. So this is what I like doing. I always like trying to get myself a bust, an item, test products onto it, and then it helps me, get the process down of what to do later on. So we'll kind of go over the good and bad on this item. So like I said, the good news is I know what I need to do now, and I have a better understanding. So definitely whenever I do something like this again, whether it's this small or like an anime kit I want to pick up on eBay where a swimsuit girl, I want to put her in like a pool or water, I know now that I need the faster curing stuff, not the slow stuff. The slow stuff is probably better for, you know, maybe like bases or wood sceneries and stuff like that. There's probably a lot of other, you know, model builders out there that like the slow stuff because they have more freedom with it within the whole day. So, you know, that's kind of a good understanding on that route. Now, what happened with this item is when I put the EpoxaCast onto it, it didn't cure as fast as I wanted it to, and it took and it bled all the scale 75 paints. So that I understand now. If I ever do this process again, get the faster curing EpoxaCast, because that'll probably won't bleed the paints as fast. Because I think the faster one, the pot life is 15 minutes. So you figure by the time you mix it, you pour A and B together, you start mixing it, you mix it well, you're probably already 5 minutes to 6 minutes in. And then when you pour it onto the item and give it a candy coat, it'll cure up fast enough. Well, that pot life will cure up fast enough where it won't bleed and pull all your paints. So that's a thing to think about too. Get the faster setting stuff. But if I was to do this item again in the Pyrex glass or a plastic container or whatever, I probably would use the Crystal Clear 220, which is that pot life I think is a half hour. But there might be a faster setting one where there's one that's 15 minutes. So like I said, you think about it. If she's in the Pyrex glass and when I want to put you know, Crystal Clear in there without the epoxy you know, coating, probably all I need to do is mix A and B together. You start mixing it together, you vacuum chamber. If you're fast enough, you probably could do it within maybe 6 minutes. And then if it's got a pot life of 15 minutes, by the time you pour, maybe you get it poured up there, some bubbles will come up, and then you'll probably make it in time where it gets into the item, it doesn't react to the paints long enough, and it cures nice and you know, clear. So I'm gonna probably find a cheap anime kit on eBay. I've seen one that's a girl in a swimsuit, so maybe I could pick up a Crystal Clear 220 and experiment on that and see if I need to do the epoxy coating on that. So it's always good to get a cheap item and try stuff. Now, the other thing is, I knew this going in, that putting this much resin in that Pyrex glass, I wasn't going to get that Pyrex glass out. I knew it was going to probably stick to it too hard and not get it out. Now these are some items I did, you know, like last year, where this was in Pyrex glass from extra clear resin. You know, I can use these as bases. The problem with the easier thing was this was in a Pyrex glass where I could flip it out and I could sort of kind of bang it and these popped out. This one I couldn't do it because if I did it I would break the head or the ears and blah blah blah. So I just went over my recycle bin and I smashed it with a hammer and it came right out. There's a couple pieces of Pyrex glass that are stuck there. I just gotta brush out and it's fine. It's okay to go. Now one of the main bad things is the black paint started swirling on me within like that 6 hours. Like I was watching it, I would come into the garage every hour and the black paint, the ink would just kind of start swirling and it started moving and coming up and around, and I was like, oh man, that's not what I wanted. And it was too late to pop her out, mix up some more and put her back in. So I was like, you know what, let's just run with it. When I turn off the lights and I show you with a flashlight, it did what I wanted it to do, but because it's so slow in curing time, it just kept swirling on me. If I was using the faster stuff, it would have worked out perfect the way I wanted it to work out. But, you know, you live and learn, you experiment, and you try different things. So I'm going to turn off the lights and I'll show you the swirling effect that was doing it. And that's kind of what I wanted to go for. But sadly, because it cured so long, it just kept swirling on me. So we'll put a flashlight under it. And you could kind of see what I was going for. You got that weird little swirling, moody looking, kind of swampy look. Now, if I was to build a light source underneath this thing, if you put the light here, you'll never see anything because that's where the clear resin is, the solid resin. But if you have light coming around the edge, you'll get all that really cool looking swampiness look thing. So, if I wanted to take the project further, I could build a box underneath of it in a light source, but I'm not going that far. So that's kind of my experiment. I had a lot of fun working on this. You know, the scale 75 paints, like I said, I'll put a link in the description on how those paints worked out. They were okay. They weren't great. Not really great for airbrushing, but great for paintbrush work. The EpoxaCast 690 is great for if I ever want to build a moat or a lake or a puddle on a base. That stuff is okay for that because it could sit there for a while and you could kind of play with it and throw rocks in there and stuff. The Crystal Clear 204 is great stuff too, but that I think it's more for if you want to make like a mold of something, like say this, you have a mold of this character and you want to make a pure crystal clear item of this. The 204 is probably better for pouring into there because it, it'll get in there and all the bubbles will come out and you can get a good clear figure if you wanted to go that route. But for my future projects, definitely into faster curing stuff. So I think the next project I'm going to work on is, I was on eBay, I saw an anime kit, like a girl in a swimsuit. You get them for like maybe $30, $40. Maybe I'll pick up one of those anime kits and I'll get a trial kit of the Crystal Clear 220 and I'll put her like in a pool scene and I'll see if the Crystal Clear 220 reacts to the paints. If it doesn't, then I got some really good ideas from larger scale statues without too much of a water. Maybe I could use the 220 and put those characters in there and come up with some really cool ideas. So, it's a good experimental video. I do a lot of like checking on YouTube and stuff, but I never really see anybody that's trying to do what I'm doing here. So like I said, Smooth On helps you out. They give you a lot of good information if you talk to them, and they could give you some good ideas of what you're trying to do. And this is the kind of stuff I'm trying to do with this. So my don'ts of this, from everything: don't use the slower stuff. Try to get the faster stuff. Definitely don't use too much black dye. Maybe the black dye would have stayed at the bottom more with the faster curing Crystal Clear. Another thing is this Crystal Clear 204 is a year old, so some parts cured up okay, but there's some parts I don't think are curing the way I wanted it to. I don't know if this is going to leak now because it's a year old, but I mixed the hell out of it. I mixed it A and B together in one cup. I poured that cup in another cup. I mixed that together, and then I poured those in smaller cups with the dyes. So it was mixed really, really well. I even vacuumed it out, but that's just what I got. So, it's a good experimental video. This is going to be a great item, though, just to leave in my studio or in the garage. So this way, anytime I'm going to do crystal clear stuff or I'm going to do a character submerged in a pool of water, I know what to do now by looking at this item. So it's not a lost cause. It's not perfect, but it's definitely something that I understand now and I'm happy with. So all in all, it was a good practice run on the bust from painting to the clear resin. Hopefully you guys like the way it came out in a sense, and then hopefully down the line we'll have some better and projects that come out and a better understanding of how to do the crystal clears without running into any issues. So thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you liked it out. Definitely check out Smooth On site. They got a lot of great materials out there that for projects. So if you're getting into the hobby and you want to jump into chemicals like this, see what they got. And hopefully you enjoyed what we came up with. Once I get this anime kit, we'll try another run maybe down the line with a character in a pool of water without worrying about stuff that's got to cure for 2 days, stuff that'll cure within like 6 hours. So thanks for watching, and we'll be back with some more videos.